The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is our online databases and our web pages, and this is where we're going to do some demonstrations for you here. I'm sure you're all familiar with Ancestry. If there's no one familiar with Ancestry, let me know and I'll look at Ancestry. But I'm not going to look at Ancestry tonight because that's pretty common. You probably have your own subscriptions to it or you're using our library edition to access information. And you should also know Ancestry changes almost daily. There's somebody that gives something to Ancestry that they're updating somewhere. I do want to tell you though about these online databases, especially when we get into newspapers. It's all about who pays for the rights. Everything is copyright protected at some point. And when we talk about newspapers, and I've got several newspaper databases here, here's what's funny. I buy a lot of different newspaper databases. You're probably saying, well, why would you do that? Because newspapers are not public domain. In the copyright world, before 1923, anything before 1923 is considered public domain. That means no one has any right to it. This is why Stephen Foster never earned a nickel off of any song he ever wrote, because there was no copyright when he wrote all of his songs. Unfortunately, libraries kept print copies of newspapers bound for many, many years. And probably 15 years ago, there was a national initiative called the Public Newspaper Project. Pennsylvania was the Pennsylvania Newspaper Project. They sent teams of researchers, Penn State University spearheaded it. They sent people out into the hinterlands of Pennsylvania to find runs of newspapers, complete runs of newspapers. In the early 19th century, everybody produced a newspaper. Families produced their own newspapers, to share information. They found in barns in Pennsylvania complete runs of political magazines that they then digitized and gave back to the owners. They made records of all of them. If the owner wouldn't give them permission to digitize them, they at least made records of what the name of the newspaper was, what the run was, where it was published, that there's some digital record that it existed. Companies like ProQuest, for instance, which is a digitization company, which is one of the databases we have, went around to little historical societies and said, we'll digitize those newspapers for us if you give us the rights. And they all signed over those rights because you know what? It costs a lot of money to digitize stuff, especially newspapers because of their size. So a lot of these genealogies, historical societies said, sure, we'll let you have access to our newspapers if you put them in digital format, which was wonderful, but now the company owned the right to the digital content. So, like for Cambria County, for instance, when we look at the Library of Congress, when it came time to digitize newspapers for Cambria County, the state library could only digitize the copies of newspapers that they owned, that they had possession of. If ProQuest or somebody else had rights to, like, the Evansburg Sky, you couldn't get it. You had to buy the database to get it. Because even though it's an old newspaper, they bought the rights to have that digital content. So that's why we have lots of databases, and that's why you have to check in a lot of places. It's all about copyright and who owns the rights to have content.